For FL1 News, I'm Josh Durso, and this is Inside the FLX. It is election season. It's September, and today we are going one-on-one with a candidate for local office. Mark Benjamin is looking to become the next town supervisor in the town of Lodi. It's a small community at the southern end of Seneca County, and one that has made, unfortunately, a lot of headlines over the last 2 years with some historic flooding last summer, and, of course, through that, dealt with a lot of challenges. Mark won a primary in June, and he's here in studio with us. Mark, thanks for being here.
Josh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, I guess the first question, let's start here. Why is the time right, and what was that process like for you and your family deciding that now is the time to run for town supervisor?
So, I've always been someone who's been involved in the community, as you know, and giving back has always been in our blood, in our psyche, both for me and my family. And it was just seemed like a natural process as we got into this year, and I sat down with the current town supervisor, I believe 2 or 3 term incumbent, and we had a nice chat, and I let him know what my intentions were, and we wished each other the best of luck.
And obviously, with a little bit of a sped up election calendar this year, what was that part of it like for you? Obviously, you haven't gone through this process before, but at the same time, did it feel a little bit different this year, obviously having to make a decision in January and February and then act on that, getting signatures and everything like that, preparing for a June primary?
For me, no, it didn't feel any different. I'm a newbie, so it was just jumping in and going through the process and going through the dates.
So when you look back at that decision process, were there a couple of issues or an issue or two that stood out to you and really made it sort of apparent to you that it was important to run this year and not hold off another couple of years or 3 or 4 years?
I don't know, as we were looking, myself or my family were looking at the world through that lens. Mm-hmm. It was just an organic, natural process. Some folks had mentioned something to me that they thought I might, be a good person to do that and take the reins on that job, and just started doing a little homework and having some more conversations, and then it just became apparent that it would be a good thing to do, get involved and step up and again, giving back, this is just another way to do that.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at the town of Lodi right now, what are a couple of the big opportunities that voters and residents have been bringing to you, saying, we'd like to see some movement here, or we'd like to see some action in this area?
Yeah, there's certainly infrastructure issues that have been brought up on a variety of topics. Water infrastructure definitely needs some attention. Our road infrastructure needs some attention, and as you highlighted, have had many conversations with neighbors and friends and fellow residents, and so those 2 main issues there. But the other thing that is a lot of folks. And I guess I didn't really think about it either until I started having some conversations, was the fact that the tax rolls in Lodi are artificially reduced due to all the land that the federal government owns there. And so, that has hamstrung us as a community in terms of that tax burden that's put on the folks that are there carrying the weight of those hundreds of acres of land. And so we need to look at that and see how we can work with the forest and maybe get some parity on what's going on down there in terms of that.
And when you talk about an issue like that, it always seems, for some folks who aren't necessarily as plugged in, like you said, that's going to feel like it's a little bit in the weeds, like it's a little bit complex and overwhelming. How do you reconcile with those issues as well as some of the ones that are more obvious and more felt on the day-to-day? Like you said, water infrastructure as a simple example. 2 things that impact people almost equally, if not more so, leaning towards the tax side of it. But they may want or they may think that the water infrastructure issue is so much more daunting and so much more important.
Well, we're not going to solve any of these issues overnight. It's going to take some time, and again, one of the other nagging issues that I see as an opportunity for us in Lodi is to sit down with a more transparent plan, revisit the old comprehensive plan, get it up to date, and make sure we have ongoing feedback in the community, and it's open and transparent, easily accessible. And so, that'll be key to the driving force on, what takes priority.
One of the things that we've been hearing, obviously, we've done a little bit of reporting ourselves on this in the last couple weeks. Response to the flood last year at the point, Lodi Point, and in general for most of South Seneca, a lot of residents, and it seems like most officials tend to agree that the state's response was a little bit lackluster, or that it lacked some follow-up and some follow-through. Some folks saying that the process to get funding through various channels was confusing, overwhelming. As if you were elected, I guess the question is, how would you work to be that liaison between state officials, state organizations, federal organizations, and the residents who probably once or twice in their lifetime would be the only time they ever interact with those entities?
I'd like to step back just for a moment, because from my perspective and my experience, the state was really a huge help in getting things in order. I think there's been some folks that have been quick to point fingers and pass the buck, if you will. And I think that has not been helpful. I think we need to, do better at picking up the phone and having a conversation with the folks that can help us. And so, hopefully, come January 1st, I'll be able to do that as well. And it's going to take a little bit of time. That recovery effort is ongoing still. There's a lot of folks that are having trouble, especially around the many creeks that go through the town. So we've really got to just keep working hard at it. And the other thing that folks I think a lot of folks don't know is Catholic Charities is administering relief funds, and they've got lots of funds there to help people, and folks don't really know about it. We got to get the word out that there's funds there to help people still. Mm-hmm. And so on all folks, all they need to do is call Catholic Charities and let them know that they need help.
So, and this is the part that I kind of want to talk a little bit more about. When you look at, you mentioned one of the roles that you see from the town's perspective would probably be getting on the phone and having these conversations with state and federal reps to make sure that all of the pieces are being deployed properly. When you look at how the town can lead more effectively, what do you see as an opportunity? Does I feel like a lot of people just think, well, they need to have more boots on the ground. There need to be more like actual action taken by the town in terms of doing things. But what is the balance there from your perspective if you were to take over that leadership effort in 2020?
Well, we've got to really come down to a systematic audit, if you will, of these deficiencies, whether it's general deficiencies or deficiencies that were created from the flood, and then we've got to just work our way through it. There's a lot of folks down by the lake that have come to the town board meetings recently and talked about the issues they're having. Well, there's a lot of other folks up on the hill that aren't coming to the meetings that need help too. Mm-hmm. And so water goes downhill, right? And we've got to address, this is something, that unfortunately was Mother Nature threw at us, where, we've got to look at, maybe some stormwater retention infrastructure, and see, people call it a 100-year storm or a 200-year storm. Well, I'm not sure that's the case, and I think we need to look at getting some infrastructure in place to deal with these storms. There's, all the climate models say we're going to get more precipitation, mm-hmm. And if you look around the whole Finger Lakes region, Penn Yan had a bad flood a couple of years ago, right? And then Geneva just flooded a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So, to say these are 100-year storms, I think is putting our head in the sand a little bit.
And when you look at one of the issues that's been talked about a little bit more recently, the town hall, Lodi's town hall, the future of it, whether it's going to be a rehabbed version of the building that town hall is currently in, or whether it's going to be a new structure entirely. Walk us through where you stand on that and how you think the town should proceed moving forward in 2020.
Well, we've got to carry out what voters decided on 2 election cycles ago, and that's carry out and come up with a new facility. So we've got to do that. We got to be careful though, because resources are tight in Lodi, and we want to continue to maintain a low tax levy, and if not, over time maybe reduce taxes. I'm not convinced that in the notion of government that we just have to raise taxes to meet our obligations. I think we need to take a close look and see where there's opportunities to tighten our belts. Maybe there's some grant funds available out there as well. We can certainly work with the magistrate system and share space with the court system, how that goes. And I think maybe there's other opportunities to share space as well with some other groups or entities.
How does that become possible, I guess? Obviously, there's lots of grant funding out there, and there's lots of every year there's new opportunities to get funds from federal and state and other resources for different municipal projects. But when you're talking about what would end up being infrastructure issues that have to be addressed, and then you're talking about, and that of course includes roads, water, and sewer. I'm talking about all three. And then you're also talking about a new town hall. You're talking about perhaps some remediation on the environmental side to ensure that Blackwell and Mill Creeks are functional and flowing properly. How do you sort of keep the ship upright so that the taxpayer doesn't take on too much in the next 2 to 3, 4 years?
Well, we've got to take a close look at that, right? And that goes back to revisiting our comprehensive plan. Sitting down with the team, town board. And I'd like to enlist some folks, some residents on maybe some work task force type roundtables or discussions, and figure out how we can tackle some of these issues, and what we need to do first, and how we can get it done without burdening taxpayers.
And when you look ahead, what is something that for the town of Lodi? Because I want to also transition and talk a little bit about some of the county issues that you'll end up having to deal with, because there's a dual role in town supervisor. What are a couple of the things that make you feel optimistic? Obviously, a lot of the things that you're talking about are things that you will have to plan over 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 years. What gives you some optimism about the town of Lodi over that next 3 to 4 year period, though?
Well, Lodi has some terrific people. There's already some good people that are involved in just bringing the town together. And I'll give you an example. A buddy and I are hosting an event for the community, and we're calling it Lodi Unplugged on September 21st, just to get together and highlight the fact that, hey, we need to unplug from our handsets and our screens and our digital pieces, and we're going to have fresh vintage is coming down to play some acoustic tunes, and Trevor Sibley and I are just going to cook some hot dogs and hamburgers and hang out and have a good time, and we're going to do that down at Lodi Point State Park.
That's awesome. So, county issues. When you look at the balance, I guess, how will you approach the balance of representing the town and obviously doing all the things that are necessary for the town of Lodi, while also serving as a county supervisor, representing at the county level and making sure that Seneca County continues to go on a positive trajectory, or at least is moving in the positive direction?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I've spent a lot of time at the county board meetings over the past 8 or 9 years, and I think I'm well versed on the issues at hand. I've got some great relationships with folks at the county, whether it's department heads or folks that are on the board. So I think it'll be an easy transition as far as that goes. And like I said, I have a great working relationship with a lot of those folks. So I think it's going to be good.
What is your when you think about the county? What are some of the things? Obviously, a larger buffet of options, so to speak. What are some of the things that you look at and you say, that would be really interesting to tackle, or that would be something that I'd really like to sink my teeth into and start working on come 2020?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing that pops into my head is working on this issue of there seems to be this notion that that we've got employees at the county that are not being compensated the same as maybe neighboring counties, right? And there's this notion that we're losing good people to higher paying jobs over in Ontario or Cayuga, and I think I'd love to dig into that a little bit and maybe work on those issues that are tied to that.
And of course, when you look forward to the county issues and the structure, are you concerned at all about the time aspect that is going to be required? Obviously, serving as a county supervisor and serving as a town supervisor, it seems that every candidate we talk to, they have some concern, some reservation about how much time is going to be involved. Was that something that you thought about early on in the process before you committed to it, or is that something that you're sort of working through now as you sort of see all of the issues that are popping up?
Yeah, no, it's certainly that was one of my top considerations before I even decided to run, because it does take some time, and I guess I'll go with this thought process that we had at home, and my wife said, "You're at all these meetings already anyway, so it just makes sense." Mm-hmm. And of course, there's obviously behind the scenes work outside of the meetings that has to be done, and we'll just get it done.
And of course, like you said, you are at most, if not all, of these meetings at a monthly basis, twice monthly if you count committee meetings as well. For those who might have some concerns about your employer and about your role with Seneca Meadows, obviously I'm sure you're coming into this with the clear, you're working as an individual, you want to do this because you want to give back to your community. But walk us through how you've addressed that concern if it has popped up in front of you thus far in the process. It's
popped up a couple times, but as you said it quite well. I'm here to focus on Lodi and those issues, and giving back to my community. So and that's really what it is, and those are the conversations I have with folks when it pops up. It's really that simple.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I think from the perspective of listening to and watching and sitting through these meetings as well, it's hard to find people in communities like Lodi, in communities, any rural community, in Seneca County or Ontario County or Cayuga County, who are willing to serve. What are some of the things, and this is a really broad question, but I'm curious, what are some of the things that you think could be done to sort of engage more of the community? Obviously, if you're elected, that's going to have to be a big priority, getting people engaged, getting that input from residents. What are some of the things that could be done to streamline that so that people feel it's easier to get involved and to let their elected officials know what's going on, or even consider running themselves?
Well, it's tough. Folks are busy. Folks are putting food on the table. Folks are running the soccer games, right? I mean, we do that too, so it's tough, and I think what we have to do is just be as accessible as possible. Maybe that means holding, office hours That's certainly one thing I've considered if I'm honored to be elected to be Lodi supervisor. So that's one thing. Again, having information at the library, having information on the website. All these are all things that aren't being done. Mm-hmm. And so again, being accessible is key, because people are busy and they need to get that information on their own schedule and on their own time. Mm-hmm. We've got to move away from that. This is when our meeting is. You better be there if you want to get the information. We got to move away from that.
And obviously, the next month and a half, 2 months will be very busy for you. Anything coming up where folks can, obviously you've got an event coming up the 21st of this month where folks can sort of come out and talk to you, I'm sure. But where are some of the other channels where folks can get a hold of you, talk to you about some of the things that they're concerned about, or just learn more about your candidacy?
Yeah, absolutely. They can certainly reach me on Facebook. I'm accessible on Facebook. They know they can certainly reach me at home, and they can reach me at work.
All right. Thanks for the time. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.